I can feel them. They're everywhere.
This is that game almost everybody can't stop bitching about. For many, this was that game that ruined everything from that point on. This game is hated even more than 06 in some places, which I'll get around to next time. Over the years, I've let my own opinion about this game slowly be washed away by that of many others, but you know what? Recently, I bought this game again for the sake of nothing more than to record some footage so there would be some visual aid to go along with whatever the hell I had to say about it, expecting to have a bad day. And I just started playing it like crazy. I don't get it. Somehow, as weird as it sounds, I was actually having fun. I thought, what's wrong with me? This game sucks, doesn't it? Why shouldn't it? I can't really be enjoying this as much as I think I am. Yet when looking at this game from an unbiased, purely technical perspective, I was somehow having a good time playing this. I realized this was the last good Sonic game, and it wasn't even about fucking Sonic. How sad is that? Please don't click that back button just yet. Actually, let me clear things up. This is not a good Sonic game. This is a terrible Sonic game. This is a shitty Sonic game. It doesn't stay true to anything we've come to love about Sonic & Co. and spoils everything. But this game isn't about him, and you know what? That really isn't a problem. This is not a new entry in the Sonic series. This is something else entirely. So for the remainder of the video, please abandon everything you know about Sonic, and let's look at this as something completely different. Don't pretend that this should try to be a Sonic game. Let's just look at this as a game, period. Of all the reasons people hate this game, the one I hear more than anything else is that Shadow's in it. Before we get to the really bad stuff, let's get to the good stuff. The physics of this game are nothing special. Sega gave up on the mechanics of the Genesis games long before they bothered to make this, and there are still a few things here and there that do the work for you, like rockets and ramps, but they don't take up nearly as much of this game as in past games. The stages are big and have a lot more depth than those of SA2 or Heroes. They're kinda linear, but it rarely ever feels that way, since there's a lot more going on here than in those other games. There are some stages where you can go anywhere and do anything you want. It hardly feels repetitive or boring. One thing that was criticized when this game came out was that it wasn't fast enough for all those unappreciative speed junkies out there. But this game benefits from that. There are plenty of speedy sections, but it isn't afraid to slow down and break the pace with other things. There's a ton of platforming and depth and a lot of variety, and it never feels like the designers are running out of cool, fun new ideas. There's a lot to do before you're done, and overall it's simply a much more involving and well thought out experience than any game in this past decade. It may sound like I'm giving this game way too much praise, but I'm not. I didn't expect to like this game at all, but it is surprisingly intriguing in its own right. One thing some people couldn't get over was that Shadow has a gun. You don't get a gun, you get lots of guns, and melee weapons. Most of the enemies are pretty weak and go down with 1 or 2 hits from the homing attack, but some of these guys take like 10 or 20 hits, and in these cases, it's a lot more efficient for the player to have saved some ammo from any of dozens of weapons. There's a huge variety of different weapons that you can pick up, with different levels of power, different amounts of ammo, different range, different attack radius, different impact radius, and even different functions. Most of what you find at the beginning of the game is pretty weak, but as the enemies grow more powerful, the placement of weapons accommodates this, but not so much that it ruins a challenge. You can only pick up one weapon at a time, but there are a lot of different weapons to try out, and most of them are fun to use. Though different players with different skills and tastes will likely grow accustomed to a certain kind of weapon that they'll favor and look for more than other types. Also, enemies carrying weapons will drop these upon being killed, so you can use those. It's a rewarding system that was well implemented and surprisingly deep. Could have gone without it, but they did a good job anyway. There are many different types of enemies to fight, and since there is a lot of fighting, the variety helps avoid a feeling of repetition. There are 3 different factions, and fights will often break out between opposing forces. If you want, you can pick a side and assist a certain group or just blow them all up for the hell of it. Chances are the survivors will just open fire on you anyway, and there are a few moments where you won't be able to progress without killing a certain specific enemy, regardless of whose side they're on, but overall, the enemy placement isn't bad. My only gripe is that while there are plenty of enemies for the other 2 factions, Robotnik himself only sports 3 types, the egg pawns and shadow androids seen in Sonic Heroes, and those clowns that roll around on exploding balls. Oh well, this isn't a Sonic game anyway. The bosses are nothing special, each faction has 2, and you'll fight each one several times as you progress through the game's elaborate story structure. Just find a gun and wail on them for a few seconds to bring them down. Sometimes they'll use tricks that they wouldn't in other places, and some of them are challenging, but overall there's still nothing that special. Oh sure, they're kinda fun, but not mind-blowing. Another thing most find odd is the inclusion of vehicles. Every now and then you can hop into a car of some kind, or on a motorcycle, or some alien hover thingamajig. Most of these vehicles are silly. Most of them don't feel necessary at all, considering you can move faster on foot. But there are certain points where there is no ground, and you'll need a hover thingy to cross a pool of lava or a toxic alien sludge, and you can mount an alien bird and soar through the air, which is actually pretty fun. One stage was devoted almost entirely to riding one of these things. Sometimes you'll even find a walker kind of like the one Eggman used in SA2, which can jump really high and adds even more to the well-thought-out platforming. If for some reason you actually want to drive around, maybe flatten a few NPCs while you're at it, go ahead. But overall, the inclusion of vehicles is something we could have done without. They really don't contribute much to this game. Also, each stage has 5 keys that you don't need to collect, but if you do, you'll unlock all sorts of neat things. And that's all I have to say about gameplay. Now for all that other stuff. As most of you will very likely know, Robotnik's English voice actor from the adventure games died after Heroes, so along with him, Sega replaced everybody with a cast featured in Sonic X. The 4Kids crew is known for their really nasty habit of overemphasizing every syllable of almost every single word like this, so the text can keep up with what they're saying, which is extremely annoying. Fortunately, they don't do this much here. Most of these guys pace themselves like normal, sane people, and that on its own makes them easier to listen to. As for their voices, I'm not going to go into detail for most of them, but I will say that a few of them are easier on the ears than they were before, and most of them fall flat. Vector's voice is especially bad compared to his hero's voice. Remember back in my SA2 videos when I said I didn't like Jason Griffith as Shadow because he doesn't sound as emotional as David Humphrey and sounds more emotionless? In most of the games Jason has played Shadow, this has been the case. However, this is one of the few games in which his interpretation of Shadow is relatable. He isn't as good as David, but he gets the job done. He really isn't that talented, but there were a few scenes where I felt genuinely sorry for Shadow, so I guess he did a good job this time. The music in this game kicks ass. It's gritty, but it's tasteful. There are a lot of cool beats, and most of these tunes are easier on the ears than one might expect. There's still a lot of variety though. It's not all rave or rock music. Some of it is chirpy, bouncy, and upbeat. Some of it is heartbreaking. Some of it is just relaxing. The tone changes frequently, and overall it's a good soundtrack with a lot of kick and flair. Not everyone will enjoy it, and it really isn't fitting for a traditional Sonic game, but again, this isn't a Sonic game. Whether you actually like this kind of music or not is not relevant. It is tasteful and well composed. The graphics just barely get the job done. Sonic & Co. used the same sprite scene in Sonic Heroes, and come to think of it, a lot of other things were copied and pasted from that. The concept art for the aliens and whatnot makes them look awesome, but most of the enemies in the game look like crap. It's nice to see that there are so many different kinds, but most of them look really, really lousy. The in-game cutscenes are fuzzy and not very well animated, and have some very poor lip syncing. The CGI cutscenes are very good though. Certain items like springs and balloons look rusty and worn, but most of the settings are very flashy and colorful. This game tries to be dark and serious, but it can't help being cartoony, and you know what, that's just fine. They aren't hard to look at, but they really aren't that special either. Still, even though the graphics are only so good, some of these places really are beautiful. Like SA2, some stages share similar features to others, but there is a lot of variety despite that, if only given that there are a lot of stages. The environments of this game are very destructible, and there are lots of things to blow up. The textures, details, and shapes are okay. The graphics are okay, just not great. They get the job done, but some things really are hard to look at. Now for the story. To their credit, Sega came up with an interesting idea. Each stage has 2, sometimes 3 different missions, and completing certain missions sends you to certain levels and tells different stories. Your choices determine where you go next, sending you along the path of good, evil, or the middle, I just don't give a shit mode. There are a lot of ways this can end, and some of these stories are confusing. Most of these endings have some interesting ideas and little things that could be considered canon, but ultimately none of them can be completely true. I guess we're just supposed to take a little bit of each ending and make of it what we feel like. In the end, you have to beat the game at least 10 times if you want to unlock the final stage. There is plenty of replay value, but considering that there are only 5 ending stages and you have to beat each one twice, there is a feeling of repetition. The story is... ugh. This game tries so very hard to be mature and fails miserably. Like many other games of the last decade, this gave in to trying to be dark and bleak and dark and grim and serious business as possible, and it suffers because of that. And it really doesn't help that this game, like SA2, revolves around humanity. We've even got this general with heterochromia, which I guess is somehow supposed to make him appear original, and the president from SA2 is back. I don't think words like damn and hell and crap are really bad words. I don't think such noises are anything to fuss about if used in a matter-of-factly way, but there is so much cussing in this game simply for the sake of trying to appear mature. This game tries too hard to avoid possibly being viewed as just a kid's game, that it is, in fact, quite lowbrow and immature. Every time you get hit, you hear, damn it. Every time you fall to your death, you hear, damn, not here. Even Sonic says, damn. Damn, 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 damn. Also, there is a lot of violence in this game. Again, that's not something I think needs to be avoided, but that is yet another element thrown in there simply for the sake of looking like a grown-up game to those simple-minded and tasteless enough to be entertained by such things. All that said, there are a few scenes that are well done, but not a lot. I do think it's ingenious that the aliens spread their poison all over the Earth that they are immune to, but nothing else is, and Shadow, actually technically being one of these aliens, is the only life form in existence that can possibly challenge them. Shadow himself is not a terrible character. He is a lot like any ordinary person, and has a capacity to do many things that would surprise people, and there are some scenes where he is easy to connect with. We learn lots of neat things about his origins that clear up whatever was left floating around in SA2. For example, we now know that the real reason the Space Colony Ark Massacre happened was because Gerald was contacting aliens! Black Doom is a great villain, just not for a Sonic game. But hey, you know the drill by now. And even though I don't consider this a Sonic game, it is nice to see continuing themes from Heroes, SA2, and even Sonic Adventure. But even though there are a few things in this story to enjoy, overall it's pretty dumb. I'm glad Sega released this game, but if they didn't, well, we wouldn't be missing out on much. Even though this game's story is pretty confusing, a lot of things were resolved, for better or for worse. Even though I think it's okay that Sega made this game, there is no need for Shadow to be in anything else ever again. His job is done. He's completed his mission, his destiny, and all that stuff. This game has a bad rep. The storyline is insulting, the visuals aren't that great, and it has Shadow in it. But the main reason people hate this game is because it has Shadow in it, and I think that is a bullshit reason to hate this game. I'm not one of those saps who think it's okay to make a terrible game as long as it's fun, but this isn't a terrible game. And while I'm suggesting that this abomination of a Sonic game still makes a good game in general, I am not saying that this could be applied to all those other Sonic games that people hate, because not only are most of them bad Sonic games, they're also bad games, period. However, this particular game is not. This game is well constructed, and there aren't a lot of glitches, the level design is rock solid, most of the gimmicks only add more depth to an already surprisingly intriguing game, rather than taking away from it, and overall it demands a lot more interaction on the player's part than any Sonic game released in many, many years. But most people don't look that far due to their truly petty bias against Shadow himself. Gameplay-wise, this is a lot better than anything else Sega released for a long, long time. Not a little better, a lot better. Better than Unleashed, 06, Heroes, Riders, Rush, the Storybook games, and all that other shit. So is this game worth it? Well, if you're looking for some fun, sure. It isn't expensive given how old it is now, and you're getting a lot of crazy shit to play around with. If you really hate Shadow so much that it causes you pain just to get near anything that features him, fine. I didn't expect to enjoy this game at all, but once it occurred to me that this isn't supposed to be a Sonic game at all, I realized that it is a good game. I can't say that for this next one though. Next time, the worst 3D Sonic game of them all, Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. Oh, and since I know you're all just dying to hear this...
Find the computer room!
Toodles!
I have to speak to you. What I said about having created you, it was all a lie. Everyone died during that horrible incident. But I rescued you with one of my robots. You lost your memory, that's all. You really are the ultimate life form my grandfather created.
The time has come. Now that the gas has overrun this tainted world, my reign has begun.